More than 200,000 voters may be purged from the Wisconsin voter registration rolls just months before the presidential primary. Earlier this month, a judge ruled that the state's election committee must immediately deactivate voter registrations for people who did not respond to a letter sent in the mail.
The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is now appealing that decision and is pushing for the state Supreme Court to take the case immediately. So let's turn to Molly Beck. She is a state and government reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Thank you so much for joining us, Molly. We've covered these voter purges in other states. I think there might be a total of 11 states that have these use it or lose it laws, but we talked about Georgia the other day. Yesterday, the Wisconsin Election Commission failed to reach a consensus on the issue. Can you talk us through just where things stand right now?
Sure. So a couple weeks ago, there was a ruling, like you just mentioned, from the Elections Commission, asking these voter registrations to not be removed from the voter rolls until the next election. And that's because they are worried that the voter registrations that are up for removal are not actually ineligible to be active right now. So there was a lawsuit filed over that decision, and now there's actually fewer than 200,000. We thought they were originally 200,000, but the Elections Commission said that they think it's about 144,000 voter registrations that are in question right now. So there are two lawsuits over this decision. One filed by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, which is a conservative legal firm here in Wisconsin, and another one by the League of Women Voters, which is a liberal organization in Wisconsin seeking to keep those voter registrations, on the rolls. And the Elections Commission here in Wisconsin has equal number of Democrats and Republicans, and so they've met a couple times over the last month to try and figure out what to do with this question, and they keep deadlocking.
So why is there a push to get the voters off the rolls now? The timing's so close to these major contests, these major deciding elections. Legally, that's not going to help any challenges. So what is their argument about why they need to do this right at this moment?
The plaintiffs in the lawsuit seeking to remove those voter registrations say that, this is just following state law, which is true. There is a state law that says if the Elections Commission believes that voters have moved, they're no longer eligible to be active, so they need to be removed within 30 days. The Elections Commission has said we're not confident in that information that is telling us that these people have moved, and so we'd like to hold off until after the election to do that. But the conservative legal firm is saying, the law is the law. This is what we want to happen. Of course, the Democrats are, they don't buy that argument. They're saying, the conservative legal firm is trying to help out Republicans in the next election because elections are so tight in Wisconsin. Every election here seems to be decided by about 20,000 votes, including the last presidential election. So each side is just scrapping for every vote they can.
So you touched on something that I wanted to ask you about when you sort of pull out and look at context. When we're talking about Georgia, we had a state that, there had already been allegations of tactics that were used that may have resulted in voter suppression. Here we have Wisconsin, where, the state, I think Trump won the state very narrowly in the 2016 election. So what is the concern? What could the impact be when we talk about, thousands of people being kicked off the voter registration list?
So, there's thousands of people that could be kicked off the voter registration list, but they can register at the polls in Wisconsin if they end up coming and wanting to vote, so there is that option for them. But the reason why this has become the issue that it has is because there are going to be, the Elections Commission believes, a few thousand people that, didn't know that they were, being kicked off the voter rolls, and then they show up at the polls and they don't have what they need to register to vote or something like that, or decide they just don't want to vote because they're not registered and it's not easy or something like that, So, and that's, when we look at the statewide elections, like I mentioned before, the last governor's race, be the presidential race. I mean, it all comes down to just a few thousand voters, so that's why this is important.
Right.
Now, President Trump is holding a rally in Wisconsin in 2 weeks. It's the same night as the Democratic debate in Iowa. So what are you hearing from your contacts there on the ground, your sources about this rally? Is this something that's really galvanizing his supporters?
Yeah, I mean, I think he seems to be sending a message. He's having this rally about a block away from where the Democratic National Convention will be later next year, and it's also going to be the same night as the Des Moines Democratic debate. So there's definitely a message he's sending here by picking Milwaukee, and also the fact that Wisconsin is pretty important to his reelection strategy.
All right, Molly, thank you so much for giving us a snapshot of what's happening in your state.
Thanks for having me.